Hello, welcome. My name is Gwen Saul, and I curate the ethnographic collections here at the New York State Museum. Today, I want to introduce you to my discipline, cultural anthropology, and share with you some of the work that I do in collections and in community. Anthropology, broadly speaking, is the study of human behavior and what it means to be a human being. And I'm sure on this series, Women of Science, you have come across archaeologists and biological or physical anthropologists who study the body, who study the past. But today I'm here to talk with you about cultural anthropology, which is the study of living human beings, the study of culture. Why do we do the things we do? Why did you wake up this morning and have cereal? Why do you go to school? Why do we have jobs that we work from 9 to 5? Why do we all agree to drive cars and stop at the light when it turns red and go when the light turns green? How do we interact with each other? How do we form relationships with each other? So, how does that translate into a museum? For me, working in the collections here at the New York State Museum, I spend a lot of time looking at our historic collections and building our contemporary collections and looking for patterns and learning from people in the communities who are represented in the collections. So because the collections I curate represent Indigenous communities, nations, and artists across what is now New York, I want to acknowledge that the museum and where I live and work is situated on ancestral lands of Munsee-speaking Mohican peoples, Ganengahaga or Mohawk peoples, and many other diverse indigenous peoples who traveled through this area. And it's important for me to acknowledge this because I work with Indigenous collections and objects. And in my work, I want to acknowledge the people who made these objects and share their worldview and what we can learn about these objects with you today. So I'm going to focus on Haudenosaunee beadwork in the collections, and I have different objects here to illustrate the points I want to make. I'm fortunate because we were just visited by Tuscarora beadworker Grant Jonathan. So much of what I am sharing with you today was informed by him, as well as the writings and scholarship of Jolene Rickard, a Tuscarora scholar and teacher, and many other artists who I'll also mention in this brief talk. So let's begin with birds. This sweet little beaded bird was made in the Ganawage Mohawk community, which is just outside of Montreal. It dates to about 1910, 1915, and it has little cherry in its mouth. Objects like this were made to sell to visitors, tourists who were generally non-native, but a lot of work and care went into these beaded objects. So the time that it took to stitch all of these beads all over the bird, on the wing, that says something about the care and attention that was put into this art form. Jumping forward to 1986, this is another bird in our collection. This happened to be made by Louise Henry, who is Tuscarora, and she is the mother of former Tuscarora chief Leo Henry, who recently passed away. So this bird speaks to Tuscarora history as well. It has cherries in its mouth, but here Louise Henry has made the cherries with little plastic cherry beads. And for Tuscarora people, the meaning of having cherries in the bird's beak or mouth is a symbol of prosperity and good health, in part because cherry trees are understood to be a type of medicine, and the bark could be boiled down and made into a medicine to help respiratory illnesses such as pneumonia. And now, moving forward into the present, we have a beautiful bird made by Grant Jonathan, also of the Tuscarora Nation, and he has decorated it with all sorts of beautiful beadwork on the tail, on the wings. He's got 2 cherries in the bird's beak, and he's chosen to write his name and date there on the underside of the bird. So we can see that there are some stylistic changes over time, but there are also, the form and the art of beadwork that's being carried on into the present by beadworkers like Grant Jonathan. So that's one way we can understand these collections, is the continued importance that art forms like beadwork have for contemporary beadworkers. And that they understand these historic pieces to be very much a part of their history, of their families, their communities' efforts to make a living through this kind of work to sell to visitors and tourists. So let's look at hearts. This beautiful, intricate little heart is from the Tuscarora Nation. And I know this thanks to Grant Jonathan because of the use of clear beads around the heart and the little barrel bead here at the bottom of this fringed loop. This heart dates to 1870, so it's one of the older pieces in our collection. Jumping forward, we have a heart from 1986. This was also made by Louise Henry. And she's chosen to embellish it with more beads and loops here at the bottom, a lovely flower, and the year that she made it, 1986. Whereas this heart was probably stuffed with sawdust or upholstery, this one is stuffed with cotton. And then we have 2 contemporary hearts. This one is done by Grant Jonathan in 2018. He made it for the Santa Fe Indian Art Market. It has owls on it. This is a pattern in beadwork that is known to originate with Tuscarora beadworkers. And it has these beautiful tubular beads at the bottom with the looped fringe. And this contemporary heart, which was done by Sam Thomas, who is a Cayuga beadworker. And here we can see that he has chosen to use some beadwork styles that are also familiar to Tuscarora beadworkers. So 1 bead at the bottom of the looped fringe at the bottom here, raised strawberries, bias tape all around the piece. That's this white ribbon. And now I want to speak a little bit about our contemporary Indigenous art collection, of which Grant Jonathan is a part of with this beaded bird. We also have this lovely beaded vase by Wilma Cook, who is a Mohawk artist. And she's taken a form, a clear glass vase, and attached beaded velvet panels all around it. It looks very much and was inspired by Haudenosaunee historic pottery. And I want to draw your attention to these beautiful voluminous loops on the castellations of the pot. Where might we have seen these before? Well, as it turns out, in the 1890s, this piece was made, and I chose to show you this piece because it has some key elements of Mohawk beadwork, such as the voluminous loops that come out of these beautiful floral pieces of beadwork that are stacked incredibly high. So if you turn it to the side, you can see that the flower actually goes up with the beadwork a good inch, inch and a half. And the voluminous loops of beadwork coming out of the center of it are all over the piece. This is actually a trifold wallet. So one would open it and keep materials, money inside this pocket. We know that it is probably from the 1890s because in the 1890s, gold and amber gold beads and fabric like this were very popular and remained popular for a good decade or so. So going back to Wilma's piece, you can see that she's included this key style of Mohawk beadwork in her own work. So this reflects a lot of Haudenosaunee artists who are looking to the creations of their ancestors in the past and continuing with their own style and their own artistic creations into the present and pushing an art form like beadwork in new directions, be it in the shape of an incredibly large and gorgeous bird with 2 cherries in its mouth, or a vessel with all sorts of beadwork on it that's reminiscent of Haudenosaunee histories and teachings. So I hope you've learned a little bit more about beadwork, about the collections here, and how anthropology can help us learn about these beautiful pieces. Thank you.